Hi and welcome to part 3 of the DNAFit series, where we are looking at today at my exercise results. So again, what we did, once my results come back, they look at the same genetic markers, and these ones in particular looking at how you can personalise your exercise program based on your genetics. Now again, like the other report, they do go through and give you some information about how the genetics work and give you some understanding of it. And then we get into some results. The first result you get is your power and endurance. So they base this on certain gene markers, how powerful are, the science behind it, and have their own personal algorithm to actually give you a breakdown on what you're more predisposed, what your bias is really. So I have what was known as an endurance bias, a very heavy bias. I'm 71% endurance, 29% power. So most people mostly say, well, looking at me being an exomorph, yeah, that's pretty much what I'd put you as someone that's good at endurance, and that's what you should be doing. The interesting thing, I'll say, looking back at my nutrition report, being an ectomorph, you should see that I handle carbohydrates quite well. Technically, I should be on a low carbohydrate, high fat consumed diet. So not necessarily by knowing someone's body type and looking at some individuals, that genetics can come into play. So even though this is a result that I was fully expecting, what it can do is also help support someone's goal. Now the interesting thing is, if me being an endurance athlete, if I want to go for a marathon and train for that, that's quite simple. I'll do very well at it, and I do. I come from a running background. Now the interesting thing is, compare that to someone that's mostly my shape and body type and wants to put on muscle and improve their size, and they come back with a 71% endurance potential. Now doing traditional strength and power, 5x5 or stuff, or traditional 3 sets of X-Man hypertrophy training, if that's what you're being guideline recommended, doesn't work for you. And in my past, I find that I don't get the gains on those sort of programs. Now recently I've been doing more high volume training, and I see great return on that in terms of muscle development and size compared to more traditional strength and hypertrophy training. And the reason for that is based on working within my nutrients genetics. I'm doing more, which my body will allow me to do, to produce more of a greater stimulus, rather than trying to lift heavy, not as many reps, and produce a more of a power workout. So if we flip that head, so you have someone that is mostly a large power potential, more power bias, and they come to you and want to do an endurance event like a 10k run. Doesn't mean to say that by genetics you can't do it. What it means is, if I was to train him, I'd look to do more sprint and interval work and give him more rest in the time, but look to push him harder, more explosive, to get the similar response, rather than taking him on low, long endurance training, because we know it's not going to work for him. The interesting thing is, what happens if you have the 50-50? It means you have the ability to use both quite as well and have great power and endurance adaptations. So what it means is you can have a mixture of forms in your training to get the benefits, or you can still just focus on one or the other. So with this, it just gives you a greater sense of direction with your training, and that is it. And it can give you it quicker as well. So if I knew this going in with someone maybe that has a power, wants to become increase muscle mass, or wants to lose weight, and if they're more endurance, I can now tailor their training based on those variables. After that, what it does, it looks at your VO2 max abilities. So what this does, it looks at your aerobic potential. So mine's medium. So what that means is that my ability to uptake and utilise oxygen effectively is about average, which is fine. And if I was high and very high, it means I could have a higher ability to do this. Again, if someone's lower, most probably would struggle in terms of some of the endurance events out there, based on their ability to uptake and absorb oxygen. Moving on, after this we have ability to recover. So what happens post-exercise? Now, most people are told within 24 hours you can train again. Now, for some people like myself, who's a slow recoverer, and this is not the case, that I would mostly need up to 48 hours recovery to actually efficiently recover fully from exercise. So what that means is that I'd have to be very creative in my programs if I want to train more, and I might recover muscularly, be able to spare muscle, but I must make sure also my energy systems could be recovering, or I'll work a different aspect of that energy system to actually keep my training going. So what it allows me to do is to actually plan my training in my week better. It also highlights the need then for a greater need of post-recovery fuel and key sources. So kind of some of the fats I need, some of the vitamins I need, and also some of the choices in terms of things like vegetables to actually promote a quicker recovery as well. Combine that with my high injury risk paints a lovely picture. One thing that I have noticed recently that I don't tend to need to train as much, don't tend to want to train as much, again, whether that's work-life balance creeping in, or it could be the other end for me with in terms of not feeling 100% and not feeling I want to come in and push myself to the limit. So what it highlights me that I'm starting to train less, so it supports my recovery genetics. Now the injury risk is, I don't get many injuries, but it's pointing at high injury risk. What this points at is two things. One, that if I don't overtrain, I reduce my risk of injury, and also if I look after my body in terms of the warm up and the cool down and some of the nutrition choices I make will hopefully support my body